The European Union has finalized the text for its landmark markets in crypto assets legislation. So the text is still officially open to comments, but sources told CoinDesk that it is essentially finalized. The leaked draft of the bill urges EU regulators to take a substance over form approach to the law, which could see new laws applied to NFTs. So my understanding of substance over form, this urges enforcers to not just look at legal form, but to look at the substance of the project and look at what's really going on in the project and then see how that pertains back to legislation that's been written. Christy, I'm going to pass it off to you first. What do you think this means for regulation in NFTs? Not only in the EU, but in other jurisdictions that are also kind of trying to come to terms with what's going on in the industry.
Well, I think the whole substance versus form is kind of epitomized by the way that they're looking at treating NFTs. They're like, NFTs, fine, whatever. It's when you start fractionalizing the NFTs that they start to look like traditional securities. And I think that that actually is a good distinction to make, because when so an NFT is like a token that is a one of, and no one can duplicate it, no one else can have it. It's just its own thing. It's a non-fungible token. Once you start to create mini tokens that represent the larger token, and you start selling those mini tokens off, and on the understanding that they are going to have some sort of value related to the whole token, then you start to sort of tread on shaky ground in terms of securities. And I think that the fact that they're acknowledging that there's a difference and not just going, NFTs, and saying, it's only once you start messing with it that we're going to start querying things. I think that actually is a good exemplar of the substance and form and intention of what the thing is. Adam?
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways that I look at this. First off, I think we can say that this is a good thing because it will provide meaningful clarity, a licensing scheme that stretches across many, many countries, and which in some ways will make it more accessible make these markets more accessible, because instead of having to apply in each individual jurisdiction, you'll really just have to have this one sort of overarching set of permissions. I think the other way that you can look at it, though, is that this will probably slow down innovation. Because one of the reasons why it's good to have a really kind of patchwork quilt of regulations about these types of things is because that means that people go to wherever sort of the most permissive environment is, and they build stuff there that they couldn't build in the more heavily regulated environments. So on the one side, it's a good thing. On the other side, it's a bad thing. And then as far as NFTs are concerned, what's funny about it is that NFTs, going back to the kind of historical origin of them, came out of sort of the understanding that, actually fungible tokens might be securities under some definitions. So then we came to this idea of, well, if you have non-fungible tokens, they can't trade like a fungible token, which means that it's different from that. But if you look at, the historical example of stock certificates are non-fungible tokens where each one represents a certain number of shares within a particular entity or organization, whatever. So they are, by definition, you can think about stock certificates as kind of a form of primitive NFT, which is very much a security. So the distinction is largely without a difference once you kind of get down to it. But it really comes down to, again, what are people using? And more importantly, what are the people saying about them? If you're saying, buy this because it's going to gain value because my team is going to do a thing, that's pretty much a security. But so again, it's a little more complicated than just NFT versus not. And the fractionalization distinction is also really important because, I spent a lot of time with lawyers over, a couple of years ago talking about this. And you can take something that's like very much not a security and very much not equity, and you can turn it into equity simply by taking this sort of route. So it's definitely something where you need to appreciate the nuances if you're going to build these types of solutions. And, a lot of people don't, but I think an increasing number of people do. And net, I'm glad to see more stability and kind of clarity coming into the markets. Back to you, Jen.
Yeah, I agree with you when you say perhaps it may be stunting innovation in some way. But I also agree with you, Christy, when you say that this is actually written very clear. I think there's very clear direction. I think it's more clear than anything we've seen come out of the US when it comes to NFTs or the fractionalization of NFTs. And I think that regulators around the world are probably going to look at it and almost like copy the homework a little bit and start saying, I think we can apply this to our jurisdiction. It makes a lot of sense. I want to add one little tidbit here. So under this framework, it requires issuers of crypto assets to publish white papers containing technical roadmaps for platforms to register with the regulators and for stablecoin issuers to hold capital that is prudently managed. I think that if many of the NFT projects we see popping up and rugging investors, we so often talk about protecting investors, protecting users, had all of these things in place, maybe there would be a little bit more information out there for those investors. Christy, I'll give it to you. I saw your hand up for a last thought on this before we go to break.
That was literally the point I was going to make.